Henry VIII is known for his 6 wives, but his hygiene was just as disturbing as his marriages. He broke the rules of God and redefined England forever. But beneath the crown and golden chains, the king hid secrets that were literally rotting him alive. Today, we're exposing every stomach-turning detail, from the smell that made his own doctors gag, to the one habit that actually caused his death. Ironically, King Henry was obsessed with hygiene and health. Contrary to the common myth that people in the Middle Ages or the Tudor period never bathed, bathing did exist, but it worked differently than it does today. When Henry was young, he was very athletic and obsessed with sports. He regularly participated in hunting, jousting, and tennis. Because of this, Henry likely bathed fairly regularly, especially after sports. But here's the catch. Back then, being clean did not mean a 5-minute shower. It was a massive, labor-intensive luxury experience. When the king wanted to bathe, it took an entire team of servants. They had to heat huge cauldrons of water over open flames and haul them into a large wooden tub. To make it fit for royalty, the tub was lined with fresh linen and filled with herbs. However, by modern standards, bathing in Tudor England was pretty gross. These wooden tubs were reused over and over. They were wiped down, but never truly disinfected. Bacteria and moisture got trapped in the wood grain, creating lingering smells and hidden grime. And the soap? Forget your gentle lavender bars. Tudor soap was made from animal fat and wood ash, a harsh, irritating lye that could actually burn the skin. Historians think Henry bathed a few times a month, which for the 1500s was actually way above average. But as he grew older, attitudes toward bathing began to change. Many people started to fear that bathing opened the pores and allowed disease to enter the body. As a result, bathing became less common. For the aging king, this shift came at the worst possible time. What was happening to Henry's body later in life was far more disturbing than harsh soap or dirty bath water. It made a man so obsessed with hygiene literally rot from the inside out. You might think Henry would dress more lightly in the brutal heat of summer, but Tudor royalty followed a strange rule. The more powerful you were, the more clothes you wore. Henry spent his days buried under layers of heavy wool and gold-trimmed fabric, even in the middle of July. Inside that outfit, he wasn't just a king. He was a walking oven. Sweat was pouring down his back in liters. But remember, bathing was now considered a death sentence. His doctors were convinced that water would open his pores and let plague enter his organs. So how do you stay clean when you aren't allowed to touch water? Henry had to rely on a 1500s hygiene hack. He wore fine linen cloth under his heavy robes to soak up sweat like a giant sponge. Every day, servants would strip away the damp, yellowing cloths clinging to his body and replace them with fresh ones. To finish the job, he would douse himself in heavy, expensive perfumes to mask the scent of salty body odor. But even the most expensive oils could not hide the rot that was starting somewhere else, or save him from the disastrous death awaiting him. While he could hide the sweat and mask the body odor, there was one thing Henry could never escape: his own breath. This is where the rot was beginning to become his closest companion. Henry VIII began his reign with a perfect smile, but it was destroyed by an unlucky luxury we find completely normal today. This ingredient was astronomically expensive, so eating it was not just about taste, it was about showing off wealth. In the 1500s, Portuguese and Spanish plantations on islands began flooding royal courts with a new obsession: sugar. At royal banquets, guests were mesmerized by massive sculptures made entirely of sugar paste, shaped like castles and mythological scenes. But there was a problem Henry did not see coming. While these sugary displays impressed his rivals, they were secretly feeding the bacteria in his mouth. In an era with no modern dentistry, the best dental care available involved rubbing teeth with rough powders or rinsing with wine, methods that did absolutely nothing to stop acid from dissolving the king's enamel. In fact, they actually made it even worse. Eventually, royal sugar led to a brutal reality: rotting teeth, gum disease, and agonizing abscesses. Historians believe the pain was so severe that it caused the king's jaw to swell and turned his breath into a toxic cloud. Henry was an extremely powerful and feared king. At his court, insulting him could easily cost you your head, so despite his unpleasant breath, no one would have dared to tell him directly. Experts today describe the scent of severe Tudor dental infections as a mixture of rotten eggs, spoiled meat, and the strongest morning breath you can imagine. But as bad as his mouth was, it was not actually what killed him. To find the real culprit, we have to look inside the most unhygienic place in the palace: Henry's private toilet. What was happening behind those closed doors contributed to his grotesque death. Henry VIII sat on a throne of gold to rule England, but he sat on a throne of filth to rule his private life. He usually used what was called a close stool, essentially a luxury wooden chair with a removable pot inside. There was no plumbing, no flushing, and no toilet paper. Instead, the King of England relied on cloth and wool to stay clean. But the most shocking part was not the chair. It was the man standing next to it. Because he spent so much intimate time alone with the king, this servant actually became one of Henry's most powerful political advisors. He held the king's dirty secrets, literally. This was the groom of the stool. His entire job revolved around the king's hygiene, wiping Henry, emptying his waste, and cleaning the pot. But here is the secret Henry's servants did not understand. Tudor hygiene was a ticking time bomb. Inside that chamber pot, conditions were perfect for disaster. It was warm, moist, and filled with organic material that was almost never disinfected. Without gloves, bacteria could easily spread from the groom's hands to the king's clothes, his bed, or even his meals. During the summer, the stench of waste sitting in open pits was so thick that Henry's court tried to mask it with expensive perfumes and herbs. But perfumes do not kill bacteria. This lack of hygiene was not just a smelly problem. It was actively weakening the king's immune system. For years, Henry lived in a cycle of infection that was preparing his body for total collapse. Henry could survive the bacteria, and he could survive the politics, but he could not survive what happened next. Everything changed with one tragic accident that opened the door for these bacteria to start eating him alive. One of the most important turning points in Tudor history was a jousting accident involving King Henry in January 1536. Most people assume Henry was always a paranoid tyrant, but before this moment, he was known as the Golden Prince, charismatic, athletic, and handsome. What happened during those 2 hours of unconsciousness changed his personality, his body, and the fate of England. Henry loved the stakes of the tournament, but during one pass in 1536, his luck ran out. His armored horse fell, trapping the 44-year-old king underneath its massive weight. Witnesses were certain Henry was dead. He remained unconscious for 2 agonizing hours. In a world with zero understanding of neurology, recovery was judged by one simple metric. Did he wake up? He did, but the man who stood up was not the man who went down. Modern doctors suspect Henry suffered a severe traumatic brain injury. This explains the sudden flip in his personality. He transitioned from a charismatic leader to a paranoid, unpredictable tyrant prone to explosive anger and increasing executions. But a broken brain was only half the nightmare. As his mind became a prison of suspicion, his body was becoming a prison of physical agony. The prince from fairy tales was gone. In his place was a man who became extremely obese and required mechanical lifts just to get onto a horse. But the real secret to his transformation was something rotting beneath his royal robes that would never truly heal. The true tragedy was Henry's leg. The accident reopened an old wound. But this wasn't just a scar. It became a festering, ulcerated wound that leaked pus and rotting tissue for the rest of his life. The infection was so severe that the stench could be smelled from rooms away. Because the pain made movement impossible, Henry turned to meat and wine as his only coping mechanism. Henry became so massive that his legs couldn't support his weight. His extreme obesity made sweating incredibly worse. His servants and doctors had to endure grim daily tasks. They cleaned Henry and his wounds with sponges, applied bandages, and drained the infected areas, all without anesthesia. The procedures were agonizing, and without antibiotics, the infection repeatedly returned. The 55-year-old Henry's health deteriorated rapidly. His leg became severely swollen and extremely painful. His physicians feared telling him he was dying because he reacted violently to bad news. By late 1546, the rotting king was a shell of a man. On January 28, 1547, his body finally gave up. Modern doctors believe his blood was a toxic cocktail of sepsis and untreated diabetes. Many see the king's slow, painful decline as poetic justice for the cruelty he had shown others, especially his executed second wife, Anne Boleyn. But while Henry's body was rotting in the public eye, Anne was hiding elaborate hygiene habits that only worsened her condition. Click here to discover her secrets.